Welcome, everybody. I'm going to get us started here. I think some folks are still filtering in, but we have a lot to talk about in a short period of time and a terrific panel. I'll just introduce folks very quickly from far stage. Richard Culatta from ISTE, Barbara Jenkins of Superintendent fame, Chiefs for Change and otherwise, Calvin Watts, Gwinnett County, and Alberto, Carvalho, LAUSD. We are here to talk about bright spots, things that are getting us and you excited about AI in schools and school districts. And at the risk of being Debbie Downer, I'm gonna just share some data that we all know, and I'll say the superintendents on this panel need no reminder of. This is not an easy moment in schools. These are tough days. Pew released a report last week. Nearly 60% of Americans have the point of view that K12 education is going in the wrong direction. Less than 2 in 10 say it's going in the right direction. 70% of respondents say that we're not spending enough time in classrooms and schools on the things that matter most, and that is core instruction. 68%, so call it 7 in 10 teachers are feeling, quote, overwhelmed, and more than half of teachers are advising young people not to go into the profession. So some version of that maybe was always true, but these are heady days where it's not easy to be in schools. And, you know, from a recent E4E study that just came out, or is about to come out, I suppose soon, teachers are excited about these new capabilities. And Barbara will talk later about a point you made in our preparation. They're already there. They're using it. So at a moment that's otherwise dark, they are beginning to see some light in this technology. And so that's what we're here to discuss, maybe both of these things. What is promising, what is getting us excited, and what problem that is solving for the educator and for the student. And maybe I'll start, Alberto, with you, and then go down the line here on a first question of what is getting you excited? Where are you seeing traction with this technology, and what problem is it solving for you?
Well, let me, good afternoon, everybody. Let me begin by, you know, the statistics that you read. Isn't that true about America? It's like 2/3 of Americans right now don't believe in a political system. 2/3 of Americans don't believe in the news they hear on CNN or MSNBC or Fox. 2/3 of Americans don't believe that, you know, we actually had people that landed on the moon years ago. So get used to it. Mm-hmm. People are digesting news and information data in very interesting ways. It's not real. And that applies to everything and everybody. What gets me excited is actually the one thing that's excited me for the past 32 years as an educator. Every day kids are born, every day we have an opportunity to really change society, change democracy. And what gets me excited is that I actually work in the one environment, despite the negativity, despite the challenges, despite the funding woes, despite the politics that surround education, I work in the only environment that actually sustains democracy, public education. Only agency in our entire nation where we actually have a chance of creating a more unified country through the power of education. And we are not only at an inflection point in our collective history, we're actually at an exciting point. You know, yesterday we rolled out here at ASU+GSV Ed, Eduardo, Edwina, Edwin, Ed, whatever you want to call it. Because whatever you call it, he's going to talk to you in 100 different languages. He's going to connect with you, he's going to fall in love with you, hopefully you'll love it. And in the process, we are transforming a school system of 540,000 students into 540,000 schools of one through absolute personalization and individualization. A tool that will meet you anytime, anywhere, 24/7, will adapt to the literacy level of your parents will nudge, incentivize, reward, know you to a point that is unprecedented in American public education. First of its kind. The last thing I will say, what excites me, beyond the technology that no doubt we will speak more about today, is the fact that teachers, principals, public education is the institution. I believe public education and democracy are two sides of the same American coin. Screw one up, underfund one, and the other will pay a price. So I'm excited every single day we're going to a classroom with technology or not. That's excitement.
I have 3 teenage boys, is Ed available in New York City? Like wake-up calls and...
Ed does everything. We'll wake you up in the morning, whatever language you want. We'll tell you what's for breakfast and lunch at school. We'll tell you how long the bus will take before it comes to get you. We'll remind you that as an 11th grader, it is time to fill out your FAFSA application, which, by the way, it's been an interesting rollout. We'll tell you and make meaningful connections if you're absent 2 days, but he looks backward at the past 2 years and detects trends in terms of attendance, and will connect you and your mom, dad to an attendance counselor automatically. Ed is not a replacement of anything. It is an enhancement that actually will create more opportunities and free our teachers and counselors from bureaucracy and allow them to actually do the social interactive activity that builds on the promise of public education.
A bright spot. Calvin.
Thank you, Alberto. I appreciate the level setting. Quite frankly, I think about this work, and I'm going to give you a date and see if anyone from Gwinnett County Public Schools, you cannot answer this question. April 23rd, 1635. Does anyone know what happened on that day? No? Boston Latin was founded, otherwise known as the oldest K12 educational institution in the country. We worked very closely with our Chamber of Commerce in Gwinnett County Public Schools. We had a chance to take a strategic leader visit to Boston, and we visited Boston Latin. Now, the building obviously doesn't look like it did nearly 400 years ago, but guess what? On the inside, school actually looked very similar to what it does today. 400 years, we're the only institution, by and large, that has not fundamentally shifted how we do business since our inception. That's a problem in my mind. How are we addressing the needs of students who are coming to school today as we have shifted to a portrait of a graduate for our students? Answering the question that our teachers and our families are asking, what are the competencies, what are the strategies, what are the realities that we want for our children as they walk across the stage and leave us? For a career, ideally. Well, we can now accentuate, we can accelerate based on our, first and foremost, this work called artificial intelligence. Now, I know there's a lot of pain points out there, but what we've been able to do so far is to build a foundation based on the tenets of core business of teaching and learning. We want our students to be resourceful. We want them to be problem solvers. We want them to be collaborative leaders. We want them to be capable to be the very best version of themselves when they graduate from Gwinnett County Public Schools. We can accelerate that learning through our AI initiative. We're doing that now. It's rooted in ethical behavior, which is clearly what we want our students to know and be able to do well. And I'm proud of where we are right now. We are not quite where we'd like to be. But as my parents said, we don't want you to be perfect, son. We need you to be able to make perfect progress. We're doing that now through artificial intelligence. I can't wait to unpack what's coming next. Excited about it? And I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks. So a couple of things excite me. I have to tell you, first, it's an honor to be on the panel with my esteemed colleagues, but let me tell you what is exciting about what Alberto is doing in LA Unified. The K12 engine, the vehicle, is slow to change and evolve. And in the short time span, as AI is moving forward so fast, LA Unified, under Superintendent Carvalho's leadership has done something phenomenal that can be replicated. Everybody doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. It can be replicated. And what's exciting about it is the notion of children having their own individual assistant that's going to help walk them through. They can have their own ownership. They can have student voice in getting things done. That is so exciting, but LA Unified is the first to go out in the forefront and do something so incredible. Commend Calvin for his work in Gwinnett as well. That is exciting to me, because here's the thing. Across this country, if you saw the New York Times article, truancy is at an all-time high. Children are not coming. 1 in 4 children are actually too truant. That means 10% of their school days they are missing. We have got to have new ways of reaching and helping our children and convincing them that K12 education is for them. And K12 education is the linchpin of our democracy. We have to have an informed citizenry. So I'm excited about what it means for students. I'm also excited about what it means for the adults, if they will be adopters. We have to deal with adoption. But for a teacher in a school, let's say there are 2 teachers here in the middle school, and this teacher leaves work about 3:30, 4:30 after the students leave. He's there for about an hour, and he leaves hands-free. He goes home, he has a life. And he's pretty confident he's doing what he can for each of his children's individual needs. This teacher's leaving at 6:30 with a book bag full of papers to grade, and this struggling guilt that somehow he may have missed meeting some of those children's needs. This teacher has an automated assistant who takes care of the mundane work and helps him stay on top of the more important things that he should be spending his time on. And this teacher does not have that kind of assistant. AI can be such a tool for our teachers. It can help us recruit and retain talent in our classrooms if we will partner and convince them that it's going to be an assistance to them and not a competition. That excites me about the potential.
I'm excited to be here with y'all. It's great to be here. And I will say, if I can add to this, it's great comments that we've heard here. I'm excited about what history teaches us about the moment of innovation that we're in now. And what I mean by that is, I spent my whole career studying how innovation happens in large, complicated systems, aka bureaucracies, right? I've looked at that, I've looked at when and where it happens, and there's an interesting thing that you see, and this is completely consistent over many, many years. You see that after a moment of trauma, of great disruption, there's a bloom in innovation. We have just been through the most traumatic experience, I think, in most of our lifetimes. Hopefully, for all of our lifetimes, we've checked the box in going through this COVID experience in learning. And what we are starting to see now, true to form, is this bloom of innovation that happens after that. Because during those moments of trauma, of transition, of difficulty, you are forced out of the patterns that we fall into, right? And so pre-COVID, if I had said, hey, let's try to think a little bit differently about school schedules instead of maybe having everybody do everything, or maybe let's think about how we could bring in experts virtually to engage, or maybe let's think about using a tool to be a coach for students, I would have been laughed out of the room, right? But now the conditions are set for us to have crazy ideas. And I mean that in a good way. The conditions are set to be able to propose things, to be thinking about things that would never have even been able to be brought up before. And that's really exciting. Let me add one more thing to this, which is, while I think this event here, and this is a little risky to say this at ASU+GSV with Air Show going down the road there, but there's a lot of excitement looking at a tool and an app. And there's some great tools and apps, and we're excited to see the ones that are coming at ISD. We created one called Stretch AI, which is specifically for educators. It's a tool to help coach educators. So there's some good apps and tools. But I think I'm most excited about not the tool and app, but how AI is forcing us to rethink some parts of the education system that need to be redesigned. And I'll give one example of that. Assessments, right? It's fascinating to me that all of a sudden we care about cheating. We care about cheating all of a sudden, right? What? Because cheating never happened, right? Until before.
Never,
do you know?
never.
Do y'all know the status on if you think cheating is a problem in American high schools? You are right. 70% of high school students report cheating on a regular basis. But here's the crazy part. Do you know what the percentage change was after AI tools became available? 0. The amount of change did not change at all, the amount of cheating that was happening. So now we suddenly care about it. But by the way, if you want to do stuff about cheating, there's lots of things you can do to reduce cheating. There's lots of culture things you can do. But access to or removal of access to AI tools makes no difference on whether cheating is happening. And what the big difference is, you want to know the big difference? You actually change sucky assessments. your assessments are bad. If you're having cheating, you have to build better assessments. And so what I love about this moment that we're in is that we are able now to finally think about, we have this permission to think a little bit differently about maybe how we do assessments. Could we do it differently? Are there tools? Should we require AI to be able to help us do deeper assessments in the same way that we now require calculators in math? This is an exciting moment to be in the field of education, probably the most exciting moment ever in the history of education, and it's cool to be part of it.
So I want to add one.
You can clap for that.
Clap for that.
Thank you.
Come on. Everybody's clapping.
Don't encourage him. So I want to add one tenet to what you just said. So it took something like a pandemic for the adults to shift, because we are very slow moving, and it's generational. School boards, teachers, administrators, it's really generational about how quickly we will move into technology. But I would submit to you, our students were way ahead of us. It didn't take a pandemic. I told you on the call, teachers are saying it's called ChatGST or something like that. And students were all over it. They were using it long before we, because they're digital natives. They're going to use it whether we get it together or not. They are all over it. Didn't take a pandemic for the young people.
Yeah.
It's the adults who are slow moving.
Let me, Calvin, I was going to throw this to you and Alberto. What's exciting about what you both shared is that you're actually doing something. And school systems are not famous for doing things. They're famous for waiting for things to be done. So I wonder, like, what is the theory of change here? How do we get this going? How do we, is it top down? Is it bottom up? Is it a combination?
I think it's a yes and. Every school district is not created equally. We know that. In Gwinnett County Public Schools, we knew when I returned to Gwinnett County Public Schools in my current role, I did ask a question. I asked the question, how many people want to improve? So I'll ask you, raise your hand if you want to improve. Every hand goes up, generally speaking. And I follow up with this question. Raise your hand if you enjoy change. Exactly. The same rule applies every time. And the inconvenient truth, as you all know, we cannot improve unless and until we change. That value proposition is disheartening to some. It's exciting for others. And it's a death knell to others, because people have used public education in one way for so long. I'm simply saying this. If we want to see change, if we want to see improvement, dare I say, we're going to have to do some things differently. Why wouldn't we entertain the option and the opportunity of artificial intelligence that can help us do something better, faster, stronger? As a teacher, I will always consider myself a middle grade teacher. I taught language arts, English major, Howard University. Go Bison. Here's the reality. To that cheating conversation, how many times did I see a student who I knew they didn't write that paper? Why? Because it didn't sound like their voice. But what if we could use ChatGPT, which I use, and I would actually entertain this and say, use ChatGPT, allow it to write your first draft. Once you have your first draft, then we'll talk about what it means to edit and make sure that your voice is heard. And so when it's time for you to submit that paper so I can read it and we can actually showcase it as a piece of true writing, that is where I'd like to see artificial intelligence work. Let's help our students.
That is a fairly radical point of entry.
We can start there, but we won't stay there.
Yeah. Alberto?
So I want to reflect on a couple of things that I've heard. Number one, in this country, we've been sort of taught, and this is actually taught in higher ed, that sustainable systemic reform, change, transformation of schools takes a long time, 7 to 10 years, 5 to 6 to 7 years. I've always been baffled by that, because I always try to do the math very quickly. How many kids are you willing to lose while you're perfecting yourself? Yeah. You're broken. The kids are not broken. You're broken. And you build broken systems that break their dreams and aspirations. Let's start there. So I don't believe in slow reform. I believe in tectonic, fast-moving, shifting reform. And there's a reason for that, because, to get here, I flew. And I would never get on a plane where the pilot would announce that today we're going to try something very safe, for your comfort, we're going to take off very slowly. I'm going to say, stop, let me get out, because that's not going to work for me. Because to take flight, you need acceleration, you need lift, you need speed. And yes, it's going to be jolting, it's going to be disruptive, you're going to feel pressure, you're going to feel G-force, you're going to feel the pressure change in your ears. But guess what? That's how you achieve altitude, height. You know, physics applies to us every time, everywhere. Why don't we accept it when it comes to educational reform? We are so afraid of change because it is disruptive. It challenges our status quo. And the most powerful gravitational pull in our school systems is the gravitational pull of the status quo, is that collective voice, do not change a thing because I'm used to it, even though it has not been working. Now, as you said, Richard, we are at a very interesting point. You're absolutely right. There would not have been the Renaissance without the Dark Ages. And in the aftermath of the pandemic, it cannot be enough for us to simply go back to the miserable conditions we had in schools across America leading to the pandemic. Guess what? Graduation rates for those kids, like me, were not what they should have been. Reading proficiency and math proficiency, even though they have been creeping out for the better part of 30 years, they were still not what they needed to be. So the question now is, we have, for the very first time in America as a result of the pandemic, perhaps the only silver lining. Every kid is connected. Every kid is basically empowered with a device. And every kid is using that device and connectivity at less than 10% of its potential use. We are operating data-rich school systems that, in terms of their use of the data to actually meet kids where they are, it is shameful. And we are investing year after year across the country billions of dollars into acceleration and remediation, yes, assessments, that knowing better, we failed to do better. Because the tools are here now. Yeah. For us to actually personalize, individualize the journey for each kid. We know where Juan's reading proficiency and math proficiency are. We know what he fears, what stresses him out. We know his level of attendance. Using all of that data, can we craft a platform, a journey, an ecosystem, a buddy that reminds him, incentivizes him, tells him the next step, reminds the mom to be an effective coach by empowering the parent to do so, but then sends also the advisories and the reminders to the teacher, and schedules appointments with the attendance counselor, and creates this voice of comfort to that child. Guess what? The technology is here. We're using it. We developed something that's now in the hands of 55,000 kids, soon to be in the hands of 540,000 kids. And by the way, because we are an equity-driven district, the kids who first got it are the kids in the 100 priority schools that report to me. These are the black and brown schools. These are the schools with the highest levels of poverty, highest levels of kids who are English language learners, with the highest percentage of disability. And that's where the need is greatest. So we cannot be slow about this. We cannot be apathetic. We certainly cannot be intimidated by those who say, oh my God, artificial intelligence is going to be terrible. It's going to bring about the end of the world. Yeah, just like the printing press, the television, the internet. Yeah. And all of you love it. Don't like artificial intelligence? Stop ordering Uber Eats. Do not use Waze. Do not call Uber. Do not watch Netflix. Because the reason why you're hooked on Bridgerton is because Netflix knew exactly what you love. And you love it.
Okay, so...
You're telling your business.
Give it up. Give it up. All right, so, Richard. Everyone's laughing and clapping. I mean, this is correct. I mean, this is inarguable, and yet, to be a bit provocative, you know, the forces of entropy are always at work, and magnified in schools. So maybe, I mean, from a policy perspective, or let's get into some politics, and I want to talk with the superintendents about labor. But from a policy perspective, like, what could go wrong? What will get in the way here? Why will this go more slowly than we know it should?
Yeah, So I think there's some things that we have to watch out for, some elements that are far stronger than we think we are. And you already mentioned it a second ago. I just want to underscore this because it's real. Status quo is super powerful. The magnetic pull of going back to how things were because it was comfortable. And in a world of change, we naturally, humans seek something that is comfortable, even if comfortable is not equitable or effective. And so we have to really watch out for that draw back to how things always were, and we got to keep our eye on that. That's one thing. The other things that we got to be really careful about is how we design our policies. You mentioned policies. Policy plays a big point in innovation. You don't make innovation happen because of policy, but boy, you set the conditions right with effective policy. And I do worry about some things. I worry about the number. So after the first question I always get with AI is how do we stop cheating? We already talked about that. The second one is what's the policy I need to create around AI? And generally, creating policy around tech is a bad idea. Right? You don't, look, how many of you, if you work in districts or organizations, right, have an AI policy? I'm sorry, don't answer that. An API policy. You're transferring data through API all the time. Do you have an API? No, you don't have an API policy. How many of you have an HTTPS policy or an RSS policy? These are all technical tools. You don't have policies around them, okay? What you want is policies around principles. And so that's the same way we should think about AI. If you make a policy around AI, you're going to back yourself into a corner, in part because I could show a bunch of tools and you don't know whether they have AI or not. So build policy around principles. And I'll give you an example of this. When I go to schools, I'm kind of a geeky guy. And so when I go to schools and visit schools, and I love to do this, the first thing I ask for is, can I see your acceptable use policy, right? The policy for internet, right? I love seeing it. Most of the policies, I was at school the other day, and they handed me a policy, 17 don'ts. Don't be a jerk. Don't share information you shouldn't. Don't cheat. Don't use this. Don't let your brain turn to mush. Don't. Not a single do. Not a single. I'm like, really? Not a single. Can we get one on there, like, and use it to learn? Right? Can we just do one thing? So we have to be really thoughtful that the policies set those conditions. And this is why it's so important. If you think about what it means to be a good digital citizen, if you think of what it means to be a good member of the digital world, contributing member of the digital world, that is a complex skill. And like any complex skill, it takes practice. But guess what? You can't practice not doing something. You can't practice not, missing the ball, missing the basket. You got to practice doing the thing you want to do. And so setting those policies, setting the conditions around practice. We want to see tech used to help solve problems in our community and our families. We want to see tech used in order to help make us understand concepts deeper, to connect with people. The best thing we can do with technology is use it to connect humans to humans. Setting those policy conditions right is super, super powerful.
Well, and Calvin, as far as I can tell, Gwinnett has done more to set preconditions for a community embrace and a policy framework than anyone else. So you must agree with Richard.
So yes, and policy is just that. It is policy. And I'll say this in a different way. Policy helps guide the work that we would like to see. I don't believe that it's a necessary evil, but we start something new. I will say this, we definitely need to have some form of guardrails. It doesn't mean that we're going to inhibit our youngest learners and leaders from doing what we would expect them to do when they have access to artificial intelligence. But we have to have both guardrails to ensure a level of safety, because I don't know about you, my wife and I have 183,000 children, one who we still claim on our taxes. That's my story, and I'm still sticking to it. But there are families who care how their child is being treated every day, and some are willing to come forth and tell us how they want their child to be treated. But I say this to say this. If we aren't providing not only guardrails, but goalposts, so there's a yes and. I'm not creating a policy to say just what you can't do or what you shouldn't do, but why can't we provide language that suggests how we can benefit greatly from a policy that keeps us safe from all alarm, but also provides us with a goal?
Just I just want to build on this real quick. I'm so sorry. I think it's so important when we start the policy, just watch the number of your policies that start with a negative, right? Watch that when it starts with, well, we can use AI, but blah, 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 blah. Just start with that positive, and it makes such a big difference. And by the way, he's not bragging enough. He has a framework for AI that was created in Gwinnett schools, which is you find it, go take a look. It's awesome. So if you want to see what good frameworks look like, go check out what they've come up with in Gwinnett schools.
I want to be careful around this notion of policy, because in some districts, policies move so slow the process of getting policies approved can be excruciating. I like the notion of guardrails, Calvin, of guidelines, superintendent's directives, but I know in the state that I come from that Superintendent Carvalho used to hail from, policies can move extremely slow. So I like guardrails, superintendent's directives. Something has to help shape it because it's moving so fast, it won't wait for policy. If you're talking about official school board approved policy, DC has learned things were getting way out in front of them before they could come up with policies. State level understands fully that they can't stay in front of AI. It's changing too rapidly. But something that's flexible and nimble, like superintendent's directives or requirements or guardrails, I just want to caution folks, if you wait on official school board policies, that can be extremely slow moving, and you've got to be able to move nimbly when it comes to AI.
So in our case, we're believers in enabling policies, not punitive, restrictive policies, because number one, the latter never works, the former always works. So we marry two important concepts in Los Angeles Unified. Number one, digital citizenship and media literacy, which our kids, actually the adults too, need a bit more of. And by digital citizenship, we have an expectation that by the time kids hit 13 years of age, they can demonstrate mastery of concepts, critical thinking concepts, that put them in a position of navigating this brave new world. In terms of media literacy, I think we all agree. If we're going to teach digital citizenship, and a huge percentage of the American population at all ages actually gets their news and information through social media and through sites, then you better tackle the issue of media literacy simultaneously, and we are doing that. The other thing I think is worth considering is, you know, we should know better. Anytime that we try to keep kids from utilizing certain assets, that is actually an incentive for kids to prove how much smarter they are than you are. Because they will break the system, they will break the bank, they will be able to penetrate and embarrass you. So at a time when America was shutting down its systems as ChatGPT was launched, we actually rushed to understand it, create a task force, bring people in to examine it, to understand it, and then put some direction and not restrictions, but enabling statements to get students to understand the power, the benefit, but also the consequence. We did the same thing with teachers. And that's how we ushered in the digital citizenship protocols for all students. That, as I said, we tied it to media literacy. At the end of the day, you know, artificial intelligence is here. You're not going to be able to push it away. It's here. The question is, do you want it to master you, or do you want to master it? And as a superintendent of one of the most diverse districts in the country, I know for a fact that my kids cannot be part of that subpar history. What I mean right now is 91% of engineers, architects, professionals in the AI space are men. 2/3 of them are white. I want to flip that upside down. And you do not get the next engineers and architects and code writers if you do not change the dynamic of who is doing the work. So at all levels, as an educational tool that empowers kids, but also as an employment possibility in the innovation space for a disproportionate minority community, we need to be there.
Yeah.
Marc, the student in Orange County, you'll love this, Alberto, student in Orange County that broke through the firewall and went in and changed grades and started running a business, so he was changing grades for other children as well. So he did have a little discipline. He had to write up how he did it, and then he had a summer internship to work in our IT department because the kid is brilliant. I mean, you got to get him on your side.
He's probably today a director in the National Security Agency.
Exactly,
right,
exactly. That kind of talent we need to encourage and get on our side because it exists, and if we don't capture it, someone else will. And I have to tell you, too, what I love about what Alberto did in Los Angeles is making sure he's serving those underserved populations first. because the digital divide will just expand. It will be exacerbated by all of this AI, generative AI, because those children will be at a disadvantage. And so starting there where you know they're the greatest need is essential. If you have ChatGPT, which is free for everybody, but it has hallucinations and it's not curated, got a few issues with it, but for those who are more privileged, they get the ChatGPT that's subscription-based, that is curated, that is more reliable, then we're creating a digital divide that's economically based as well. And so I just had to throw that in before we run out of time.
Sure.
We're barking up a tree right now that is, it's timely and it's innovative, and here's what I want to leave with. So we began this conversation, and before I arrived, and I want to thank our team, those who I may not be able to see here, just for phenomenal work that is that's laying the foundation for artificial intelligence to thrive in Gwinnett County Public Schools. But here's our reality. Our reality is we have students who we know have not been served well each and every day. And we're finding out that the ways in which we can serve them in a much more effective way start with how we see them as students, as young people. We began this career, we began this journey about asking ourselves, and this is post-COVID when I returned. So it was a virtual call, over 160 family members, staff members, teachers, students on the call to answer this question. What competencies do we want our students to grapple with, to embrace, to leave us with once they graduate from Gwinnett County Public Schools? And that turned into our portrait of a graduate. That notion of resourcefulness, collaborative leadership, the ability to think critically about the world around them. Once we set that base, this framework, this AI learning framework, allowed itself really to take hold. And what do we mean by that? We started with ethics. The question that we often ask, for those who were in GCPS, you know this. Just because we can, does it always mean that we should? And we better keep asking ourselves that question. Aside from that, computational thinking, data analysis, all of those skills we want our students to know and be able to do, that can happen and it can be accelerated through the work of artificial intelligence. We're excited about the journey that we're on, and we only are limited by what we are not willing to do. So appreciate that time. Thank you.
All right, we're getting toward our end, and I'm going to ask in a kind of an explosive question to round us out here, and it has to do, on the list of things that could go wrong or the constraints that we have. We are watching other big parts of the economy, and you had a front row seat to this with the Screen Actors Guild strike, that are threatened here. So obviously we want to avoid that scenario. We want tools that are for and by and of the educator, but there's a playbook and there's a framework, another less good framework, that is threatened by these tools and by the people who need to be using them and benefiting from them the most. How are you experiencing that? How do we avoid that? And this might be our last conversation here.
Well, I think there's always the possibility and the chance that there will be some degree of opposition to the innovation as a result of misinformation, lack of awareness, or to a certain extent, some legitimate threat to the kind of work that somebody in our school systems currently does. So it's on us to actually paint the picture and tell the story of the benefits associated, not as a replacement tool, but actually as an assisting tool to the work of teachers, counselors, school psychologists, psychiatric social workers, and a powerful tool of assistance to students and parents. We're in the process of doing that. And ED, as we launched it, is a tool for parents and students. Does not interfere with the work of teachers. At some point in the future, through the collaborative work with teachers, and I think this is the game changer, we can open new doors and windows for teacher collaboration, for lesson planning, aggregation of resources, pacing guides, liberating teachers from the bureaucratic work associated with that, allowing teachers to actually be more free to be that powerful social agent in a classroom, to dedicate that personalized attention to students, to differentiate the instruction. That's the picture I want to paint for our for our workforce. So it does not have to be explosive. But yes, I mean, you mentioned a strike that really touched the core of replacement.
Yeah.
If I'm going to use your face, your voice, your words, your work product, and I can use that and replicate a sequel to it, that's going too far.
Yeah.
So that should not be happening anymore. Then we should be replacing or attempting to replace the all-important social, interactive nature of what a teacher does every single day in a classroom.
I want to make sure we're very careful about student data safety and keeping them protected from predators on the internet. I want to make sure they're kept safe. I also want to make sure they're not so isolated that their social emotional needs are not taken care of. I think that's critical.
Yeah. I'm going to build on what Alberto was saying, which I think is really, really critical. I'm going to ask this as a challenge. And the challenge is this. What is the value of being human in an AI world? What value and I mean it seriously, I'm not meaning this sarcastically. What value do humans bring? For 100,000 years, we have had the monopoly on higher order thinking, on decision making, and all of a sudden we don't. And I think we have this moment where we can reflect and say, what are uniquely human skills? What are skills that should never be handed off to AI? I don't think we know yet. I think that's why we're so threatened. That's why we're having these workers striking, because only you can do that because it's doing it better than you can and a lot cheaper, right? And so it means that we need to ask, what are the things that we should never hand off? There are uniquely human skills. I'll let you think about what those are. For me, I think they're things like discernment, recognizing what's the right path forward, creativity, curiosity, love, civility. We can talk about what those are, but when we know what those are, then we can start to design schools around doubling down on those uniquely human skills and really making sure that's the core of the learning. And that's awesome, but we have to first know what uniquely human skills are. And that's our challenge right now.
Quick final points. Alberto?
My quick final point is, look, we're talking about the possibility of the future. The future is here. The future is now. We know that as a result of the pandemic, looking at NAEP scores alone, we lost 30 years of math gains, 27 years of language arts literacy gains. Any one state's accountability measures for proficiency in reading and math that declare and easily show 6 to 7 years of learning loss. And those who choose to ignore or deny learning loss, that's a disservice to our kids. It is true. So the question is, you have tools available to you right now that can actually be a part of a solution to accelerate learning, accelerate kids towards their full potential, while simultaneously bringing in their parents in whatever language they speak. We have tools right now that can personalize the journey. We have tools right now that, by the way, achieve the impossible, which was bring in competitors, as we've done in Los Angeles Unified via a public-private partnership with All Here, and its CEO, Joanna Smith, is with us. We were able to bring the competitors, my God, IXL and Age of Learning and Curriculum and Associates, iReady, and all these folks were forced to play in the same sandbox because we wanted the parents and the students to have but one single sign-on. And we did not care about the fact that when you went into iReady, you needed to read Curriculum Associates or IXL or Discovery Learning. You know what? That's like going to the symphony and forcing people to see what's happening behind the curtain. No. The lights go on, the music is perfect, you see the show. The end user experience is the only thing that matters. So we were able to do this in less than 1 year. Just imagine if the entire nation actually dedicated the resources to make this not a possibility, but a right for every single kid in America. The resource is there, the knowledge is there, the engineering is there. This is no more a skill set deficit. It's not that we don't know how to do it or how we should do it. It's a will set proposition. We know what works. We know what can work. But do we have the courage to actually enable it? And the day we transition from skill to will, we solve the problem of America's children.
I shared some sobering data up top, and we'll close with this. 13% of teachers say, no way am I ever going to use this in my classroom. The rest of teachers are ready. That is what they are telling us, and they're very fortunate to have your leadership. Thank you very much.